Startup Week co-founders, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership, Tammy Dorr.
Good evening, Denver Startup Week. Welcome to an exciting evening with startup visionaries Charlie Ergen, Mark Cuban, and Brad Feld. Chinese rockets and disco dance lessons, the art of reinvention. Who's excited to hear from these incredible visionaries? You gotta love Denver Startup Week. Startup Week is all about bringing the community together and celebrating all things entrepreneurial. My name is Tammy Dorr, and I serve as President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership. I'm also one of the proud co-founders of Denver Startup Week. I'd like to acknowledge my fellow co-founders, Ben Data and Eric Matizik. How about a round of applause? All right. Great, free entrepreneurial events do not happen with incredible partners. Special thanks to Dish tonight for making this happen. Sling Studios live streaming. And of course, we want to take a moment and acknowledge our title sponsors for Denver Startup Week. These companies really invest in making sure that you have an incredible experience. So let's give a shout out to WeWork, Comcast, Aging 2.0, Chase for Business, and the Downtown Denver Partnership. They've been keeping you in free food and drink for most of the week, so keep sending them the love. We've got some exciting news to share tonight. Last year, we had 13,700 participants in Denver Startup Week, making it the largest free entrepreneurial event in North America. But guess what? We now, as of today, have exceeded 17,000 participants. Yeah, I think that's telling you the story. It's telling all of you the story about what's really happening in our entrepreneurial and innovation community right here in Denver, Colorado. But that's not the only reason we created Startup Week. We wanted to provide a platform for you to connect, get the resources you needed to start and grow your companies, and to tell the story to the nation and the world so that we could attract the best and brightest employees, more founders, more investors. And we're doing that. We, this week, have already had 52 million social media impressions. So you're absolutely paying for Startup Week through spreading the word about Denver. Thank you all for that. It's a big number. So, as we kick off this evening, there's no better person to help guide the conversation this evening with these incredible visionaries than the co-founder of Techstars and the Foundry Group, one of the nation's most impressive early-stage investors, one of the nation's best entrepreneurs, a true friend of Denver Startup Week, and unquestionably a true partner, leader, and friend of the startup community throughout the state of Colorado. You know who I'm talking about. Please welcome Brad Feld.
I like the shag carpet. It's my pleasure to introduce the two main event tonight, two people for the main event. I'd like to start with Charlie Ergen, co-founder of Dish, who I think probably everybody in this room pays money to each month, or at least I hope they do. Charlie, welcome. And from Dallas, one of the best entrepreneurs of this generation, a basketball owner, and soon to be president of the Dallas PTA, Mark Cuban. All right, we're going to have about 45 minutes of the Charlie and Mark show, and I've got a bunch of stuff for them to riff off of, and then we're going to open it up for about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. My request with Q&A is simple. Just ask the question. No preambles. Just ask the question. So we're at Denver Startup Week. A bunch of people, many of the people in the audience are either entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. Both of you have incredible entrepreneurial histories. Talk about the origin story. Talk about the beginning of Micro Solutions and sort of those first moments. Talk about the beginning of
oh my goodness.
What was EchoStar. Go back 30 years.
I'll let you go back.
Well, first I have this incredible urge to sing and dance right now.
You can do that.
But if you've ever seen me sing and dance, I think I'll talk about the early days of Dish, which was called Echosphere at the time in 1980, so 37 years ago. My wife Candy and my partner Jim DeFranco, we decided we would start a satellite television business. The dishes were 10 feet in diameter, weighed hundreds and hundreds of pounds. It cost, I think the first one cost about $20,000. And we just decided to go into business, and we picked satellite television in part because we like to watch TV, so it was something a product we liked. And the fact that we didn't know anything about satellite TV, and neither did anybody else. We didn't know how to spell satellite at the time, literally. We always spelled it wrong, I think with one T or one L. And then, and so we just got into it, and then ultimately we became experts in it and built a business out of it. So a little bit lucky because it was a business that had legs.
I went to Indiana University, went down, saw a bunch of my friends in Dallas, decided to stay, and got a job at a little company called Your Business Software. And it was a PC software shop, and it was there that I taught myself really about computers, and I really got into it. And about 9 months in, and I was doing okay. I was living, as an aside, I was living 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment, and so it was a little bit nasty on my personal side, but I was able to get up, go to work, and I was getting smarter and getting better at it. And then one day I was getting ready to close my biggest deal, which would have been a $1,500 commission, and it also would have gotten me real close to be able to move out of what we called it the Hill Hotel. It was really just a dump. And so I went to one of my responsibilities at the store was to sweep a floor just like this and wipe the windows down and open the store up. And so I called up Barbara, I'll never forget her name, Depew, who worked with me. I said, will you cover for me? She goes, yeah. Then I called up my boss. I said, I'm going to go pick up a check, a $15,000 check, and bring it back. So I'm going to have Barbara cover for me to open the store. And he goes, no. I'm like, but it's a $15,000 check, $1,500 commission. He goes, no, I need you to open the store. Then I made the executive decision. I'm thinking to myself, if I show up with a $15,000 check, what's he going to do, fire me? And oh, by the way, he was from Colorado, but I'm not going to hold that against him. And oh, by the way, his name is Michael Humecki. Anybody know him? But so I got fired, and I was stuck living 6 guys in a 3-bedroom apartment, and so I went and started calling on people who weren't customers of the other store, but I had a relationship with. Found one I said, look, it was an architectural lighting company. I don't have the money to go out there and buy the software for you, but if you'll front me the money to buy the software, I promise you I'll make it work no matter what. If it doesn't work, I'll wash your car, walk your dog, I don't care what it is, but I'll pay you back somehow. So I started a company called Micro Solutions around that. I made that software work. They referred me to somebody else, who referred me to somebody else, who referred me to somebody else, and 7 years later, we had grown to $30-some million in revenue, and I sold it to CompuServe, which was part of H&R Block. So that was kind of my beginnings.
So stay at the beginning, maybe wind it into it's now a little bit of a business. Everybody in this room that's an entrepreneur has had an oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Right? That one that you've had many of them. Go back to your first one or a big one early. Where like you had a business and you felt like it could all slip away.
Well, I actually did do that. We had sold a system down in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, which was about a 4.5-hour drive from Denver. We had the big dish at that time was on the back of a trailer, so you could transport it, but it stood up like this. And of course, our partner had a Lincoln Town Car, looked like something from the mafia, but it was probably 20-year-old car. So we were gonna drive. We worked all day, and then we were gonna drive down that night, and then be there in the morning to install it. So about 4 a.m. near Walsenburg, a gust of wind came. I was driving, and I did in fact say, "Oh shit," because the dish went in the. We only had 2 dishes. We only had 2 pieces of inventory. It went in the median, and so I just lost half the assets of the company by driving. So, of course, it was the middle of the night. Couldn't really tell him, and with some help with some people who stopped, some truck drivers, we actually got the thing back in the trailer. It was kind of bent up, and the lights didn't work, but we kind of made it to Pagosa Springs, and it didn't. In the dark, it didn't look too bad, and so we got there, and the ranch hand came out to see it, and it was, of course, light at the time. So I said, "Here we are. We're getting ready to put this thing in." The guy goes, and I'm telling my partner Jim, I said, I think maybe it's okay, right? Being the optimist that I was, and the first thing the guy said is, "What's that big crack in there?" And we go, "Oh, well, it's not really the dish we're putting in. We're just putting the pole in." And so we put that to concrete, went back, got the other dish, and did it a week later. But that was oh shit. And it was really was almost the first day of the company. And honest to God, that was the hardest part of the business ever. No matter what we've gone through, that was the worst time. But I found out that I had partners who would, live with me, even though I almost bankrupted the company the first time. And so I had partners that I could trust. And when you trust people, you can. When you trust the people you're working for, you can accomplish a lot. And it was a great. When we got past that and we got the other system in, then it was a great confidence builder for us.
My oh shit moment. We were 2 years into Micro Solutions, and I got a call from the bank, and they go, "Mark, we got to tell you something." And I'm like, "What?" Some lady just came through the drive-through and cashed all these checks. And I'm like, "Okay, what's the problem?" They go, "Well, the payee was all whited out, and she had put her name in." I'm like, "You didn't cash them, right?" "Oh, yeah, we did." And I'm like, "Oh, shit." And I go back to I'm in the office, and I go to our folks. I'm like, "What happened?" And we had to work backwards. We were doing our accounts payable, and we thought we had good procedures. And so I had checked the payables list, compared them to the check, signed it, put it in an envelope, right? The system printed out the address and company name and everything. And so put it in, sealed it, gave it to the receptionist to mail. The receptionist takes out the check out of the envelope, whites out, this is back in the day, whites out the payee, types in her name over top of it, Renee Hardy, if you ever run into her. But I don't hold a grudge or hold on to these things at all, do I? And literally, we had $84,000 in the bank for our payable. She took $82,000 of it. So I was like, oh shit. So I'm like, banks, we're gonna get our money back from the bank, don't worry. I go to the bank, Republic Bank in Texas, and I go to the banker. I go, "You just cashed these." He goes, "Son, you ain't got a pot to piss in." I'm like, "You got a John?" So, because I'm ready to take a shit right here. But like Charlie was saying, we had great vendor partners, and we had great people at the office. We didn't have a choice. I mean, we couldn't get mad. There was nothing to get angry about, because we had to go back to work and solve the problem. And so we just went back at it, called all of our vendors, explained what had happened, asked for some more time. They gave it to us, and then we became a stronger company as a result. But Renee Hardy, R-E-N-E-E.
Let's bounce forward a little in time to the mid-90s. the very beginning of the rise of the commercial internet. And, maybe 94, 95, 96. And you, at this point, you'd sold your first company. Charlie, at this point, Dish was up and going and was a business. And there was a period of time that a bunch of people here experienced because they're old like us, that the younger people in the room didn't experience. That was this very interesting period of time between 1995 and 1999, sort of the rise of the internet bubble. But that first wave of innovation around the internet, where entrepreneurship really became something that was broadly talked about in the US. So put yourself in that period of time and talk about what you were doing and how you responded to it and what felt rational and what didn't.
Well, for us, it didn't have a big impact. And the reason we had launched our first satellite to now make the dish little and virtually free, so we knew that was going to really grow our business really quickly. And so we did that at the end of 1995. So 96, 97, we were going 90 miles an hour, just trying to we were selling everything that we could manufacture. So we were making hay while the sun shines. So we were going crazy fast. And we didn't really pay too much, it was dial up, and didn't pay too much attention to the internet other than reading the stuff. We didn't use it too much in our business. A little bit later, we met a guy named Steve Perlman who explained that we could store video on a hard drive, and we developed the first DVR called the Dish Player with Steve, and we had to dial up and for the internet, because internet TV. It's the first internet TV, and then it was, but it also had a hard drive for video, which actually became a good product. The internet TV at that time wasn't very good. So we didn't really fit too much into that.
Yeah, I remember specifically, after I sold my first company, I retired. I bought a lifetime pass on American Airlines, and my mission in life was to get drunk with as many people as I possibly could in as many countries, and I have to say I was very good at it. I came back, and I was hanging out with one of my buddies from Indiana, and he goes, and at that point in time, we were huge Indiana basketball fans still, and to listen to a game, and it was before all the games were on satellite and cable and everything, to listen to a game, somebody in Bloomington, Indiana would take the local radio broadcast, put it next to a speakerphone. We would get a speakerphone, we'd all gather around and have our, buy a case of beer and listen to the games while drinking beer, but it was through a phone. And my buddy was like, there's got to be all this new internet stuff, there's got to be a way to figure this out. And so I was like, okay, I've got a networking background, I'll figure it out. And so I bought an ISDN line in the second bedroom of my house. I went out and bought a Packard Bell computer, downloaded Netscape server software, and all the TCP/IP software and everything that we needed. And then we would use WAV files that was more of a progressive download than a stream like you know it today. And so then I went to a local radio station in Dallas who had some sports talk radio stations, and I said, we think we might have the next cable television. And he's like, the internet what? And I'm like, look, here's all I want to do, and we'll just see how it works. I want to take this 8-hour VCR that I just spent $29 on, and I'm going to take the output of your audio port from your board for your radio station, put it into the input, this analog input, and I'm going to record 8 hours of your radio stations, your shows, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to encode it on this Packard Bell 90 megahertz computer, and then I'm going to go tell people to download this software to be able to listen to your shows from anywhere in the world. He's like, okay. So I would go online on CompuServe forums, Prodigy, AOL, anything, web, anything I could find, and say, if you're interested in Dallas news and sports, come to this website called audionet.com, download this from this link, and you can listen to Dallas radio. And all of a sudden, bam, 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 people started downloading it like crazy, and I was like, ooh, this could be something really fun. And then we got more into the technology, and then we got some more bandwidth, and then we were able, not long after that, 6 months later, we were able to do live. And I went out to the same places, and we had an email newsletter, went on CompuServe, all the forums again. I said, now we're going to go live. Just everybody listen in and tell me what you think. And literally the first time we did anything live, it was me and my buddy in the second bedroom singing, "We are the kings of the internet. We are the kings of the internet. Can anybody hear us?" And then bam, 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 shut up and put something good on. But that was our early pegging for the internet.
No, but it was really... But a little history, Mark's real genius was he sold that company for $3 billion. About 24 hours before the internet crashed, and it would have been worth about $300.
I wouldn't go that far, but yeah.
So each of you had this incredible time period in the late 90s where essentially, my wife Amy likes to say to me whenever I talk about a company, are they selling their widget? Which often is incredibly frustrating because a lot of companies don't have widgets yet. Each of you had a widget, and in your case, you were selling your widget as fast as you could. In your case, people were downloading it as fast as they could. Was there a moment where you felt like you crossed over and it was unambiguously going to be successful? And what was that moment like?
Yeah, for us, because I like to climb mountains, I always say that mountain climbing is the hardest part of the mountain, is the crux to the mountain. So once you get past that part, you know that you still have a hard time to get up top of the mountain, but you know you've done the hardest part. And for us, it really was. For us, it was really early on in the big dish business when we bought a piece of electronics that kind of captured the imagination of the industry. And we kind of cornered the market on that piece of electronics, and we kind of knew we had made it. And then the second crux, really, when we transformed to the small dish business, was actually the launch of the satellite. We're on a Chinese rocket because we didn't have any money, so the Chinese thought we had money, and we could pay them after we launched. So, and nobody thought they could launch satellites, so it was a good match. But when the satellite went up successfully, I knew that we had gotten by the crux, and I knew we would be successful when that launch went up. And the feeling was, I don't know, it was a kind of calm moment for me. It's like, yeah, we did it, and that for me. But it was kind of a calm moment. It wasn't anything. It wasn't jumping up and down and going crazy. It was just kind of a calm moment that a lot of hard work by a lot of people. For a long period of time, in 20 minutes in a controlled explosion where we had about a 50% chance of it being successful, it actually worked.
No, that's amazing. Mine wasn't as dramatic. I think, we got up to 1 million users in 1998, and if you think about it, streaming to 1 million people, audio and video, almost 20 years ago, we just got to that point where we finally had enough weight where people had to come to us. We streamed the first Super Bowl, we streamed the first World Series games, the NBA Finals, whatever it was, audio, and in some cases, for football games, doing video. And then there were all these different events where we had to scale up. So we did this thing with Victoria's Secret where we streamed in video the Victoria's Secret's fashion show. And we got over 2 million users and over 500,000 simultaneous users, and everything crashed. We hit this point, and everything just crashed, and no one ever thought, because then it was postage stamp size, and the idea that people would go to one destination and watch a video, people said, no, it wasn't going to happen. So I think, getting scale and really demonstrating to people that streaming really was for real, because I can't tell you how many times people, when I would try to explain it, well, you're going to have a device, you're going to connect to the internet, and we're going to put audio and then video over it, and you're going to be able to watch it or listen to it wherever you want. That's so stupid, That's never going to work. I have a TV. I have a radio. Why are you wasting your time? And over and over again, and then to get to the point where literally, people were coming to us and saying, okay, now we get it. Now it's time to start streaming. And when I think it was really the inflection point when we got to those 1 million users and we had a multi-million user event. That's when it really started to take off.
So let's come back to the present. It's 20 years later from that period of time.
When you're having fun, huh?
Yeah, it does move, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you could go back to that younger you and give that younger you some advice, what would that advice be? Go back 20, 25 years.
Well, I wouldn't have. I would have put some sandbags on the trailer.
All right, that wins.
I mean, for me, my advice to my younger self, don't fuck it up. The next 20 years are going to be a whole lot of fun. You know, I mean, I wouldn't change anything, literally, despite all the mistakes and all the screw-ups. I mean, I always consider myself the luckiest guy in the world, and the ride's just been amazing. Hopefully, like Charlie and I were talking, now we're still riding, right? Hopefully, we're just speeding up and doing more.
When did you guys first meet? What was that first moment where you remember meeting each other?
What, I was trying out for the Mavericks? What was that?
He could play. He could play.
I don't remember. I don't know. I didn't.
No, that's when you sprained your ankle after you dunked the ball, remember? First he catches his elbow on the rim, and then he kind of got out killer. I think it was probably with HDNet. Yeah. When,
I think he was trying to sell me some TV, and
Yeah.
it wasn't very good, and I was trying to...
Hey! It was the first all high definition TV network called HDNet. Yeah. And so, again, just like when people poo-pooed on streaming, when we started high def, everybody was looking at these big, LCD type screens and going, that's a $25,000 TV. No one's going to pay $25,000 for TV. And I'm like, you just wait. It's going to follow the same price performance curves as PCs, and it's all going to come down in price, and HD is going to be ubiquitous. And back then, everybody's like, nah. I remember going into Fox, and what was the guy's name? Andy something or other, right? And saying, Fox will never use this. You can't tell the difference between this picture and that picture. I'm like, okay, I'll be an idiot again. But then I met Charlie, and Charlie was like, let's give it a run. And,
Was this the first major distribution deal?
It was our second. It was our second, yeah.
Good, so early.
But satellite was really, for HD, we could put up one signal and broadcast the entire United States. So it was very efficient. And even though if we only got 10,000 subscribers, it actually could be economical. We're a cable company
And plus, those are your highest spending subscribers, too. So it made a big difference.
And we still carry HDNet, 1-800-333-DISH if you don't have a subscription.
1-800-33-DISH. And it's called Access TV now, but yeah, 1-800-33-DISH.
So I grew up in Dallas and left when I was 17 and went to college. My family, my parents still live there, and my uncle and one of my cousins still live there, and they all have businesses and are involved in a bunch of different things. Mark, you've been instrumental in so many ways foundationally in Dallas, both the growth of the city, the growth of the community through what you've done with the Mavericks, and not just the basketball, but the integration of sport into the community. Today, when you think about a city like Dallas, which is, like Denver, one of the fastest growing cities in the country, it's an incredibly healthy city, vibrant. What do you think is key to the next 10 or 20 years of a city like Dallas?
I mean, there's so many fundamental issues. I mean, you can talk about tech and all that kind of stuff, but the reality is it's dealing with the fact that not everybody has access to the same opportunities. We've got to make it so that everybody gets a quality education and everybody has an opportunity to get a good job, right? And look, it's just, there's still a lot of work to do. And you can talk about healthcare, you can talk about all these things that, but I try to take it upon myself. And look, it's not just me. There's a 1,000 great people who are doing more than I do in Dallas. But I try to help where I can. And, the thing about the Mavericks, and any, whether it's the Nuggets, the Avalanche, the Broncos, whoever, running a professional sports franchise is so different than any other organization. Charlie has just crushed it, right? And he's done amazing things. Apple is the largest company in the world by market cap. Apple, could reach $1 trillion market cap and no one's throwing a parade. You know, when the Mavs won a championship, it was 100 degrees out and 500,000 people came out. The whole city just gets behind it. So I have access to do things. You know, you have people come, I have parents ask if their sons or daughters who are ill can, there's just so many things, so many ways you can connect. And, you know I don't do enough, but I just try to use that as a platform just to try to make Dallas a little bit better.
Charlie, same kind of question. I mean, you've been foundational in the development, growth of Denver and of Colorado. You know, Dish is an incredibly important company here. You've been deeply engaged in many things. Sort of looking out the next 10 or 20 years, what kind of things should we be focusing on in Denver to continue the health and growth of the city that we've got?
Well, I mean, I think we're pretty fortunate that we've had really good leadership at the governor and the legislative and the mayors of the major cities. We've had really pretty good government. We have low tax rates. So I think you have to, as a city, you have to. I don't think it's really. We're kind of on the outside of that, but the political leadership, good government does matter, and in general, Colorado's government has been good, and they've created an environment for people to be creative and be successful. And even visionary things, with the last major airport to be built, any great city's got to have great transportation. And so you have to have great education because you have to have a workforce that is educated. So all those things, I think Denver puts Denver on a great foundation. And you've got energy, and we're unique, and then we can do solar energy, wind energy, oil and gas, coal, all that's in Colorado. So I think where we are focused as a company is really on something that we can do, which is the connectivity side. We have a lot of spectrum that we've acquired over the years that can be used in a wireless way to connect communities and people and things. And there's going to be a lot more machines connected to machines than there are people to people. And smart cities, for cities, that's going to be an important thing so that you can connect. So you're just more efficient, whether it be your street lights or your garbage cans or your parking spaces or your air quality or your autonomous vehicles or whatever it's going to be. And so I think we can play a role in that as a company, and we get excited about that piece of it. And to Mark's point, when you really get into connectivity, as long as everybody has access to that connectivity on an equal basis, then it's what they do with it. You know, and so you don't want redlining where certain parts of the population can't get access and other people can. We talked a little bit about rural Colorado. Some people don't get access in rural America. You've got to bring those people together so that everybody has equal access, and then it's a fair game, and you make of it what you can. And some people take advantage of that, and some people won't. But the people that do take advantage will earn it, as opposed to they didn't have a chance.
Both, let me build on the rural piece a bit with a question, sort of play it to Texas as well, because both Texas and Colorado have similar, not equivalent, but similar topologies in terms of, you know, very, very concentrated, vibrant cities, and then lots of non-city and rural space between those cities. You know, in situations, if you think about what just happened in Houston and Texas, Houston got a huge amount of attention around the floods. If you looked at a map of Texas and actually knew Texas, Houston was actually hit pretty bad, but the rural communities around Houston were really, really decimated. What can we do as states, right, and as citizens of states to try to deal with what has been so visible from this last election around the urban-rural divide? Are there things that those of us living in the city can do, and how should we think about that going forward, both in terms of technology and equalizer, but also other things? I mean, back to your question, your statement, Mark, about giving everybody equal opportunity. Are there ways that in the city we can embrace our rural communities or engage with them in a more constructive way? All right, that's called a question that lands with a thud.
No, I'll take it because I grew up in rural America, and our first 10 years in business, we only put these big dishes in farmers, ranchers, small towns. So we do a lot with rural America. And satellites is a great equalizer because the beam can go anywhere. It doesn't discriminate between cities and rural. In fact, it works better in rural because you've got better line of sight to it. So we do satellite broadband today. We with a sister company called EchoStar, which owns Hughes Communications. So They're one of the leading companies for satellite broadband. So there's nowhere in the United States today that we can't put in a 25 meg down, 3 meg up service tomorrow, for less than $500. In fact, we're doing stuff in Puerto Rico now. We're one of the few communication links in Puerto Rico now. So there's a lot of things to do. The government, one of the problems is government policy, particularly in Washington. They don't understand satellite as well as they understand the local utility who may charge $5,000 to go out to a home, and so they want to subsidize. And those guys write rules that eliminate satellite from some of the government funding stuff that would get it out there a little faster. But we compete with them pound for pound and sell a fair amount. We have a couple million subscribers today in rural America. Another company called Viasat has almost that much. So there's technology that'll get there. It's going to be a little slower. Maybe it's not going to be quite as good as that person has fiber to their home, but it's going to be a leveler, and it's economic.
I mean, honestly, I can't say I've given a lot of thought to rural communities. It's just the reality. But what I will say is, I think for the port cities in Texas, Miami, tornado alleys throughout Texas, we have to, when we rebuild, we have to rebuild and expect more. We have to expect it to happen again. We have to build and set new standards so that we're not building to yesterday's earthquake or yesterday's tornado or yesterday's hurricane, but we have to expect that it might be back again and again, and it might get worse. And unless we rebuild our cities to newer and better standards, then the people who take the brunt of the problem are the people who can least afford it. And I think it's incumbent upon those of us who have influence to try to say, you know what, in Texas where we have floodplains, we need to change some of the zoning rules. We need to change some of the building codes. Otherwise, it's just the definition of insanity. And, maybe these storms are just random. Maybe they're by chance. I don't think so. But in the event it's a 1% probability that there's human influence on the scale and number, we need to anticipate it and rebuild those communities in a way that anticipates it happening again. Otherwise, we're just crazy.
So, good. My guess is this is probably the only time this week that I get to hang out and talk to a owner of a professional sports team. So I'm going to shift to current. I'm going to shift to current events thing. There was a lot of activity this weekend around professional football and the NFL. How are you thinking about this dynamic from your position, both as owner of Mavericks and the NBA, in terms of
Okay.
the conflict? I mean,
Can we just talk among ourselves? No one's going to repeat this or publish it anywhere, right? Thank you. So sports and politics have always been connected. I mean, I remember when, not long after I bought the Mavs, we had the NBA's first Chinese basketball player, a guy by the name of Wang Zhizhi. And the night before he played his first game, there was an incident with a plane where China shot down a plane or damaged a plane, and it was a major international incident. He walked out on the court in Dallas, and everybody gave him a standing ovation, right? There was another time where we had a player during the beginnings of the Iraqi war. He said he was against the war, and Dallas is a red state, and so everybody was like up in arms for about a week. He hit a couple shots, and people forgave him.
You had Dennis Rodman, our new ambassador to North Korea, right?
See what happens?
help! Help!
You okay?
Yeah.
Dennis, he didn't mean it. Either that or Kim Jong-un is everywhere. So I'm glad we took care of that subject.
Yeah, now, in the early days of when we started our company, that I probably would be on the floor in pain on the way to the hospital because that'd be at least a $5,000 lawsuit. But given that nobody paid to come here, there's not really profit loss motivation here. So. Anyway, but yeah, you had Dennis. I remember talking to you about Dennis Rodman.
Yep. He was actually my roommate for a couple of weeks. there's still a little thing of Carmex, the lip stuff that's still under his bed. No one will touch it. But anyways, I think I'm lying. But so I've had controversies with players before, so it's nothing new. And it's not like politicians refuse to take donations from athletes, owners, or managers. It's not like they refuse to take endorsements from them. So they've always been connected. The only thing that's changed and so my approach to the White House now. I kind of look at the guy in the White House like this. There's his job, and then he has a phone, right? And I've just come to the conclusion to separate the two. Whatever he does in his capacity as president, I'll just look at it like that. And then I've just come to realize that in his heart, when he goes upstairs in the White House, he's just a Twitter troll, you know? And like any other Twitter troll, look, anybody here not trolled on Twitter? We've all done it, right? He just has more followers and does it more often. And I think a lot of this is just based on the fact that once he inserted his Twitter side of his life, you wonder someday if someone will ask him this question, now you're 80 years old, what would you tell your younger 71-year-old self? When the president decides to tweet, things get interesting, and I think really that's what's going on. And I had this conversation yesterday. Look, most people don't pay attention to politics. We just go about our lives. And if you happen to be interested in politics, that's great. But there's not a great number. Maybe 5% look at politics like a sport, and we get all excited, and we pay attention. But there's more people who know who Beyonce is than can name the president of the United States. The vice president, right? More people can tell you about Beyonce's twins than could name who the vice president is. Most people, we just go about our lives. We don't pay attention to all that stuff. And so I don't think it's that big a deal. He'll start tweeting about something else, and we'll move on to something. He'll drop, curtains on somebody else, and it's just, I don't see it as that big a deal. It's just something he tweets about. Trolls are going to troll.
So let's stay on another.
Remember, we agreed. No media. Don't put that out.
Good luck with that. Let's stay on another topic that has been front and center in the tech industry the last chunk of time. I'm not going to quantify the time. I think it's been a persistent problem for a very long time, but has become visible at national level, which is the notion of diversity and inclusion. There was a bunch of stuff about VC and entrepreneur and power dynamics around sexual harassment. But broadly speaking, over the last 3 or 4 years, I think there's both been real awareness of there being a diversity issue within the tech industry, as well as many initiatives that have started to have some positive impact. And when I talk about diversity, gender, I think is front and center, but it's not just gender. And it's probably not lost on anybody that there's 3 middle-aged trending to older white guys sitting on stage here.
Who's middle-aged?
In the context of that, what are some things either that y'all are doing or that you think could be positive contributors sort of in the next 10 or 20 years, either from the business activities you've got or just philosophically around this notion of more inclusivity? I'll just sort of end with a comment. Those of people that here that know my bolder thesis that was in the book I wrote, Startup Communities, my third tenet is to build a successful startup community, you need to be inclusive of everyone at all levels. And in that context, I wasn't really focused particularly on diversity and inclusion, but more this notion of casting a wide net and trying to get people involved. Any reactions, any thoughts about things that this group can be doing, we can be thinking as leaders in the tech community that we should be doing?
Well, I only speak for Dish, and as a fairly large employer and a company that hires a fair number of people every year. I don't kind of look at it that way. What I look at is we have to provide as a company the opportunity for people to reach their potential, and create an environment for those people who want to work hard to achieve that. We provide an environment for them to do that. I personally have found that to be very inclusive and very diverse. If I walk around our company, whether it be our corporate headquarters in the field, it is a wide diversity of people. And in fact, I would say that because the majority of college graduates now are women, as an example, we certainly have many more of the women in our company. The thing that's still lacking is that hasn't caught up at up to the executive level, because people haven't had as many years in the workforce to get the experience to do that. So I think there's things that, there's things. We have a women's club, we have mentorships, we have other things that you can kind of accelerate that a little bit. But I don't want to be a company where you would look at a minority or a woman and said that you didn't earn. Somebody says, oh, well, they got that job because they're a woman or a minority. I want to make sure we look at whoever has that job, that they earned that job, and there's not, nobody thinks that somebody just got it because of their sex or gender or whatever. So, that's what I try to do. I don't know that, I will say that at least my generation, as new generation comes into our company, that's not an issue. That it has been an issue in the past with older executives, and I see it in other companies. So it's just we grew up differently, but it helps to have kids, helps to have daughters, and you find out that they're really capable, and then you say you want to make sure that half of the workforce wants to come work for you. You certainly don't want to do it, and so that's hopefully have an environment. If anybody out there wants to come work at Dish, just come down tomorrow. We don't pay much, but we'll give you a shot. We'll give you just like you got a shot, when you started. So, and then in 6 months we'll pay you a lot of money if you're good.
I mean, from my end, over time, I've just learned, that when I first was starting, in particular, my universe of potential employees, I kept it relatively small because we were ready, fire, aim mode, right? And we're going so fast, and you turn around and, male-female ratio was about right, but I wasn't nearly as diverse as I needed to be. And so I had to make a concerted effort to broaden my reach, right, and broaden where I was looking. And the more diverse our company became, the better we did. Because to Charlie's point, the consumers are far more diverse than they used to be. And people want to buy from companies they trust. People want to do business with companies they trust, companies that represent who they are. And so on one hand, in terms of hiring, I think we're doing a far better job, even though we can always do better. And then in terms of where I invest, if anybody watches Shark Tank, you'll see one person, great. And we're moving to Sunday nights. So call Dish, 1-800-333-DISH, and remember to get ABC, and we'll be on Sunday nights.
I actually think you were much better in Dancing with the Stars. 2005, 2007, 2007.
I actually thought you had a higher opinion of me.
He came in 8th place.
I came in 6th place. I beat Floyd Mayweather. But in any event, but really?
All right, before we... Go ahead, Charlie.
No, I'm somewhat embarrassed to be up here with him. Shark Tank I get, but Dancing with the Stars. Well, it was you, right?
Yes.
All right.
I had fun.
Before we
So, if you can judge for yourself. Just go ahead and Google Mark Cuban Dancing with the Stars. If you need a good laugh, make sure alcohol's involved. It was good.
Well, here we can go much further than alcohol legally, so it's. That's true. Before we go to audience Q&A, Mark, you have a question for Charlie?
You really thought I finished in 8th place? No, look.
No, my whole family was glued to the edge of our seat, watching you dance.
But what I will say, I've looked up to Charlie.
We voted for you, but
And I appreciate that. I needed every vote I can get. But I have to give Charlie a lot of credit. I mean, he talked earlier about partnering with people you trust, partnering with people you respect. I've learned a lot from Charlie over the years. He's always lived up to his word. He's always done everything he set out to do and been a great partner for us. He's always given me the benefit of the doubt in a lot of cases. And, there's not a lot of people that I would travel back and forth between 3 cities just to sit here and get abused. And so, I mean, not a question, but just a thank you. So, he's first-class guy in every which way.
Any questions for Mark?
I think it's time to move on.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. So I can say something nice about Mark. He is going to run for President of the United States. And it will be great to have somebody who can dance in the White House. But no, he's very much entrepreneur, and I've learned a lot from Mark. And so anytime as a person or a business person, you get a chance to learn from somebody else who's maybe had different experience than you can, and it's always a privilege to talk to other leaders and get their perspective, and it's important that if you get a chance to do that, because you're going to learn without having to maybe make some of the mistakes, so you don't hire Renee because Renee's of the world are out there.
One comment for each of. One comment for each of you before we go to Q&A. I've missed getting on the Mark Cuban train 3 times. The first time was AudioNet. I had a chance to invest in AudioNet when I was just starting working with SoftBank. I think it was literally within the first month or 2. I ended up having a meeting with Mark, and SoftBank decided they didn't want to invest, but that was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was I was co-chairman of a company called Interliant, which went public and ultimately went bankrupt. And we were competing for a company in San Diego that was a web hosting company. SimpleNet. And we thought we had the deal, and Broadcast.com got the deal. And the stupid thing that I didn't do at that moment was call up Mark and say, "Hey, I got this thing called Interliant. It's a lot bigger than that thing you just bought.
It was a great company because they were the first to do user-generated content on the net.
He was great. Bob something was the guy's name.
Samples or something like that, yeah.
And then the third is a Colorado story that I don't know if you remember or not, but I was an early investor in a company called Raindance, which was also doing as its first business called vStream. Its first business was video streaming, and I think when it was AudioNet, before you went public, you made an offer to buy the company for about 10% of the company or something like that.
Not quite, but yeah, we made an
and
offer.
I don't know how serious the offer was, but it was turned down, and that was a mistake. So if there's another chance to get on the Mark Cuban train.
Don't feel bad, right? So here, I'm going to tell you a quick story. So 2005, 2006, I invested in this company called Red Swoosh. And Red Swoosh did peer-to-peer file transfers. And the entrepreneur was really, really aggressive, and I had to calm him down all the time and just, put your customers first. Super aggressive. And we finally sold the company to Akamai, right? Then he sends me an email, and I get this email from this guy named Travis, and it's called Uber Cab. And he says, "You want to invest again?" And I'm like, "Yes," but I never heard a response back. He went out and got financing, and the rest is Uber history. So don't feel so bad.
I don't feel bad at all. I have no regrets about all the many, many things I missed. The point I was going to make is that when you do decide what you're doing next and there's a Mark Cuban train, I'm on it.
I appreciate that.
And last comment on Charlie. When I moved here, within a month or 2 of moving here, and as I started to try to get to know people, your name came up, and I heard about EchoStar, and you've been a big inspiration, whether you know it or not, for many entrepreneurs in Colorado who have seen what you've done. And we have a connection that I hadn't thought of for a long time, but I thought of tonight when I saw you, which is a great entrepreneur, a guy named Blake Krikorian, who died a few years ago at 50 or 49. Extremely close friend of one of my partners, Ryan McIntyre, was the founder of Sling, or Sling Media, which we were large investors in. And I know that that experience was super important to Blake. Yeah. And as a good friend of him and his extended family, thank you.
Right, and we're trying to take that Sling brand and technology that he started, and that's really, Sling TV that we do today from a streaming. It's funny that, you really, in a way, pioneered Spotify, Pandora, and certainly and Netflix and what we do at Sling. So you've been on the bleeding edge of those things. We've come in a little bit later as the technology's matured a bit. So, very, very interesting.
Thank you both. Let's do some audience Q&A. Remember, just ask the question. We can't see much because of the bright light, so I don't know how this is going to work, but are there mics? Yeah, there are mics up front, so just please pop up. Come on, there's some questions. If not, I'm going to have to ask more questions. You don't want that. Maybe they don't want that.
This is like Price is Right.
And just line up. Line up and we'll go quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go first. Name's Rico Leon. Thank you so much for coming down here. I'm a fellow Yenzer. Crazy question. I'm sure you get a million questions about entrepreneurship.
Ask the question.
Can I get a picture with you guys? It's not going to happen unless I ask.
Jump up here and get a picture fast. While the next question is happening.
Okay.
All right, go ahead. Next question.
Well, you guys are vamping for a photo.
All right, that's the only picture.
My name is Allison Bergamo, and I would like to know from all three of you, what is your criteria and or litmus test for bringing on potential partners or investors? I just heard a thud.
No, I only have one criteria. You have to have a lot of money.
Yeah. I was going to say, does the check clear?
Yeah. But, I'll go a little deeper than that. A little different, but for employees, since we have people here, we look for three things in employees. One, we look for intelligence, because we can't really make you smarter. We can give you a lot of experience, but we can't make you a lot smarter. God kind of started you out on that path, and then we look for energy, because I hope that when it gets to be 6 or 7 o'clock at night, you can still got a lot of energy, because a lot of the stuff that you have to do in business, there's going to be real times when you have to work really hard, and so energy is super important. And then we look for ambition. We look for somebody who wants to achieve something. So, do you want to just have a job and get a paycheck, or do you want to achieve something? And most of what we try to do is achieve things, and we build a good product, and we hope that that's going to turn into revenue and profit, but it doesn't always. But we want to build a good product first and foremost, and we want people who want to achieve something.
Like Charlie, I'm going to turn the question to the one I want to answer, which is what my partners at Foundry Group and I invest in. We have a set of filters around things that we're interested in. We try to say no to everything within 60 seconds. Assume that it gets through the filter. We're then focused on three things. One is we're looking for founders who are totally obsessed about what they're doing. Not passionate, but obsessed. They're put on this planet to do that thing. Second, we need to have some affinity for what they're doing. We don't have to be daily users of the product, but we have to have some affinity for it. We have to care about it. And that comes from having invested in way too many things over the years that I don't care about. And I just don't want to do that anymore. And then the last is that the founders have to want us to be investors in their company as much as we want to be. It has to be a two-way, bi-directional thing. And we found that to be, in some ways, the most important thing. There's lots and lots of companies that we would have loved to invest in that we didn't, because the founders didn't really want us as investors relative to anybody else, and that's okay.
I just look for companies that can have an impact, and entrepreneurs that I think can have an impact and companies that I think I can have an impact on. And within that, I look for people who are always learning, committed to learning, committed to selling, because no company ever achieves anything without sales. And, and I've added the criteria of people who look to reduce the stress of others. I think as I've been through a lot of companies, a lot of startups, one of the greatest qualities I've found, whether I hire people or whether I invest in them, do you increase the stress of others or do you reduce the stress of others? If you reduce the stress of others, I'm going to hire you and keep you forever. If you increase the stress of others, I don't want to be anywhere near you. And so that's probably the primary criteria, particularly if you want a job.
Thank you.
I think I know what my blog post tomorrow is about. That's a good one. All right, picture or photo side of the house.
Yeah, right. I want to ask for a photo, but Charlie, Mark, thank you so much for coming out here. Really appreciate it. Question is for Mark. When you had that first situation where you needed to actually sell ahead of the software after you got fired, what did that conversation look like with that prospective client? What were the really important value points that you hit on in order for her to instill confidence in you?
It was me on my knees. No, basically, I remember the name, Micro Solutions, Microcomputer Solutions, basically, shortened to Micro Solutions. And my goal was to make my customers more profitable, more productive, and give them a competitive advantage. And I just sat there and said, I understand your business because I'd done my homework. Here's how I'm going to apply this software so you can reach those three goals: profitability, competitive advantage, etc. So,
were there any, just quick follow-up, like how did the hurdles? Surely she gave you some object.
It really wasn't about objections, right? Could I do it was the question, right? And then I just had to earn it. And once I got the first done, and she was more productive, they did have a competitive advantage. They were more profitable. Then I still had to hustle to get referrals, and it took time. I couldn't do as much as I wanted, but I just asked for a referral, and then I got to another one, then another one, then I was able to hire somebody, and that's how it all got rolling.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're up.
All right, hi, my name's Matt. I'm an esports entrepreneur, and so for obvious reasons, Mark, I'm kind of looking at you for this. If you were trying to pitch
League of Legends game, and it's
no, I don't even mess with that. I'm going to the blue ocean. But if you were pitching Unicorn without the resources you have today, how would you get people on board?
Unicorn is one of the companies I've invested in that does esports gambling. That's a 2-hour conversation, right? Esports are going to continue to grow. How mainstream they become is to be determined. I think there's a little bit more hype than reality here in the United States, and a little bit less hype and more reality overseas, particularly in Asia. So it remains to be seen. But Unicorn really does most of its business in the 118 countries that allow gambling. And so we're going to continue to grow it and just see where it takes us. I mean, there's no real quick elevator pitch that I can give you on it.
Paul French, Innovation and Tech Today. How's it going, Mark? Hey, so this is a question for Mark and Charlie. Mark, you were actually quoted recently, talking about how traditional TV could actually combat streaming because it's more reliable. But what steps can traditional media take in view of the epidemic of pirate streaming, like Periscope and other media? What steps can be taken to make sure, like, to drive people away from that toward paid content?
Charlie's more the expert in that than I am.
Well, I think ultimately you have to give people a product at a fair price, and if you don't do that, you're going to get piracy. And we've had piracy in our industry since scrambling happened. When we first started, all the signals were free, and then they scrambled them, and then they wouldn't sell them to people, so people pirated them. So you have to make the product a fair value, and if you make it a fair value, I think people will pay. Spotify, people aren't. Maybe I'm confused. People don't pirate quite as much as they used to. You make it convenient, you make it all in one place. It's difficult because the media landscape is, a lot of the big media stuff, people more my age, and they're used to the traditional ways of doing things, and they're very resistant to change. And they are professional managers, and they get a contract, and they get a bonus if they make their budget, and so they're just not going to go out and do a lot of innovative things. And when they finally try to do it, they sometimes are behind the curve, and then they make matters worse. And so it's pretty diverse in media. So I think the interesting part's going to be we've got some really big companies coming in media, whether it be Amazon or Google or Apple or Facebook, and it's going to be interesting to see how the next generation and Netflix, they spend way more than HBO and the Showtimes and all the other guys combined probably. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get in the marketplace. But they could blow the current media guys away today. So
it's interesting, right? The best example I always use is Netflix. Their password has 4 digits, and you can use any 4 digits you want. And everybody shares passwords, and they don't care. That's how they grew their business. It was marketing to them, which was far smarter. Trying to stop people from pirating on a Periscope stream across Twitter, right? Maybe if it's the Mayweather-McGregor fight where there's so much at stake for one event, yes, that's an issue. But feel free to pirate Shark Tank all you want.
I mean, one of the big things, I would say one of the big things that I've had a bone of contention with and became the most hated man in Hollywood as a result is advertising. There's 16 minutes of advertising in an hour of shows. I haven't watched since the DVR days. I haven't watched the commercial, and I know my kids haven't watched the commercial. So you can't. You're going to have to go to another generation, another mechanism of how you do it. And we think there's technology to do that. We invented technology that skipped the commercials, and then of course we got sued by the broadcaster. So, which we ultimately won, right? And we had technology for the broadcasters to do an individualized commercial to people that might be more meaningful to them. But they didn't want to hear about that. They just sued us. And then after they lost, then they wanted to talk about how we could do it a different way. And so, but today we still have, even things like sports, right? In the NBA, if I could be critical of the NBA, it would be that the last 4 minutes of the game takes about, 40 minutes.
We're working to cut that down to 39 and a half.
Yeah, so they've lost. I love basketball, but they've lost me as a fan because I just don't have 40 minutes of my day to watch 4 minutes. So
and it's an issue we have to address.
And have to address it. In NFL, you kick the ball, you score a touchdown, 2.5 minutes commercials. They kick off. It goes out of the end zone because the ball's now they don't want to have run backs, and so another 2.5 minute commercials. That is not a product that's going to appeal to the next generation.
Right. Well, just out of curiosity, have either of you tried to go on Periscope and see how accessible it is, how easy it is to pirate one of those events? Yeah.
Yeah, there's streams from everywhere.
Yeah. No, we have customers today that it's even simpler than Periscope. It's just a camera in front of a TV for a college football game,
or just stream it. Yeah.
And everybody at the last fight was was streaming it. So, but I would have cut the Wi-Fi off in this arena, but it was the T-Mobile arena, so they didn't cut it off. But I do think that major media leadership is not as aware as they probably should be there.
Got it. Thank you so much, and Brad, look forward to speaking with you.
Talk to you soon.
All right, here's my question, two-part question. Firstly, it's mostly directed at you, Mark. I go to school currently for entrepreneurship. I've already learned how to learn, but I feel like I'm learning a lot of valuable business-related academics in college. Am I wasting my time?
No.
Second part of my my question is, after I get out of college, I'm looking to commit myself as a salesman to a specific industry. Can you guys recommend an industry that I could really grab onto and get on that bleeding edge of, really commit to, as far as tech goes?
I mean, I'm a believer that you stay in school and you get a degree, right? Just the challenging environment, the fact that, particularly in business, you have to learn the language of business. Otherwise, you're going to be dependent on somebody else. If you don't know at least basic finance, marketing, sales, etc., accounting, you're always going to be dependent on other people just to get started. And in terms of what industry, if you can't, you got to figure that shit out yourself, right? It's even worse. It's like, I have a 14-year-old daughter and I can't tell her anything, but like the minute someone graduates from college, they want me to tell them everything, right?
My passion is for martial arts. It's something that's not necessarily very profitable. My senseis, they struggle to pay their rent.
Well, then you're fucked, I guess, right? Just figure it out. You don't have to have the, you're 22?
Yeah, 23.
23, you don't have to have the answers. I mean, I was sleeping on the floor, and I had a list of, the first job where somebody said yes, that's where I took that job, and I got fired. And it worked out okay.
All right. Thank you very much for the time.
Good luck.
This question's for Mark.
Yeah, I cursed, and there's a little kid coming walking up, and I'm like... Sorry.
Mark, with all the investments, personal ventures, and being owner of the Mavs, how do you prioritize and manage your time to ensure that everything thrives?
I don't do meetings or phone calls unless someone's writing me a check. Everything else, seriously, everything else is via email. And that allows me to search for old stuff, I have my own little filing system to keep track of everything. If I have to have a meeting because something needs to get discussed, I mean, I will, but it's like pulling teeth. And when I get weekly reports, or a report either every week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on the company, but I always want bad news first. I expect good news from the companies I invest in. I want the bad news first so I can help you get through it and help you figure out a solution. I don't need to, oh yeah, we just closed this deal. If it's something special, great, tell me, right? But otherwise, I just want to hear the stuff where I can help you and then you get to move on and I get to move on.
Hello, my name is Lydia McCullough, and I have a couple questions. First of all, I'm going to pimp my mom out. She's the one who created the sales training program for Oppenheimer Funds and Trizetto. So if you guys are looking to hire anyone like that, she's available.
Have her send me an email, brad@feld.com.
I'm sorry, what?
Have her send me an email, brad@feld.com.
Brad@feld.com?
Yep.
Okay. Brad@feld.com. Okay, thank you. Sorry, my hearing is terrible. And then secondly, how do you get investors interested in a company that doesn't involve tech per se? Like, it's e-commerce, but beyond that, it's not technology.
Don't. Look, I'll answer it in a different way to take for bad. Starting a company, the first step is not about finding investors, right? The first step is starting a company. And the best equity is sweat equity. And the best companies, for the most part, are the ones, if it's an e-commerce company, presuming you don't have to keep inventory, find somebody that knows how to use Shopify, or teach yourself to use Shopify or Etsy or whatever, and just set up a shop yourself, right? Because going out, the minute you take money from somebody else, especially if it's Charlie,
it's real now.
Yeah, it's real. And the expectations are different. So, unless you, I always tell people, don't borrow money to start a business unless you have absolutely no choice, right? Meaning you have satellite dishes you have to buy for your inventory, or a rocket, or whatever it may be, physical inventory. Figure it out.
So I've been using my student loans to pay people. It's expensive money, but
you think?
It's worth it. So I was just curious, and I'm working on a fashion line for tall women, and it's just hard getting people's attention. So thank you for your time.
Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we got time for a couple more. I know we're not going to get all the way to the end of the line, sorry, but let's keep going back and forth a few more. Quick.
Sure. You guys are in unique financial situations as parents where you can afford really a lot for your kids, and they probably know because of your public status, and the public also knows. So I wanted to know, as family men, what some of the values you bring to parenting in your unique financial and success positions.
I have no kids, so I'm opting out of this one.
You probably have to ask my kids, some who are in the front row, I see. But I think as a parent, you try to lead by example. So they should know hard work is important, and they should know that family is important, because one of the great things about having your own company, I've never missed my daughter's birthdays, or I've only missed a couple of my kids' birthdays. And that was when I was in the middle of the ocean on a boat that I couldn't get to. So, and that's, I don't know, that's hundreds of birthdays. So they know that that's important. But basically, I think you lead by example, and you make sure that they know that they know you love them, and that everything else is kind of irrelevant at that point.
I've got 3 kids, an 8-year-old boy, 11-year-old daughter, and a 14-year-old daughter who tells me every day I have no clue what I'm doing. So I'm probably not qualified to answer that question. But like Charlie said, I mean, you just do your best. And I'm going to keep on trying to do my best. But literally, my biggest fears in life are their health and them growing up to be entitled jerks. And to Charlie's point, I make them earn everything. I'm not that dad that just buys them stuff. I'm not that dad who just brings home presents.
We don't even let our kids get some out of the minibar, because I'm not paying $4 for a bottle of water. So.
And it's true, right? It's like, I was at lunch in Dallas with my kids and my wife today, and the bill came, and my daughter just looked away. She's 14, and I'm trying to get her to understand that, you know, things cost money, and you don't get that money without effort. And so I handed her the bill. And she's like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "I'm in deep trouble." Right? You try your best you can. I'm still learning. I'm willing to take all advice from anybody.
All right. I think based on time, we'll end on the kid who has never heard a swear word before tonight.
No, but tell him, we go way back. This is not the first time we're meeting.
Yes. So my name is Jack Minot, and my question is for...
Tell him how I know you, Jack.
Thank you.
Wait, tell everybody how we know each other.
So I got on Shark Tank last November for my business, Jack's Marketplaces and Stands.
Jack killed it. He made Kevin look really bad.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My question is for all 3 of you. What advice would you give to a kid who wants to become an entrepreneur? Woo!
Well, my first comment is, it sounds like you're well on your way. I started caring about business and being excited about business when I was about 13. And when I think about me between 13 and 51, where I still feel like I'm a kid, the thing that has been most powerful for me is continually finding people that I could learn from. And not just learning from them, but also putting energy into doing something that was helpful for them. Because the best relationships over time are where you learn as much from them as they learn from you. And I've had a number of people in my life, and the person that comes to mind is a guy named Len Fassler, who bought my first company, who's in his mid-80s. And I remember the day, maybe 15 years after Len and I first met, where he said to someone when I was with him, "I think I'm learning more from Brad than he's learning from me." And to this day, I still think I learn more from Len. So my advice to you would be, just keep finding those people and don't let them go. And the way you don't let them go is, in addition to learning from them, you teach them by involving them in what you're doing.
Yeah, I would agree with. I would agree with what Brad said, but I think the hardest part, if you want to be an entrepreneur, I think the hardest part is just to do it. So and you got to burn the bridge behind you. So there's, failure's not an option. And I think that's so first you got to make sure you get skills. So get an education. Get the best education you can, in addition to what Brad said, and then when you're ready, just go for it. Don't put. I see a lot of people kind of they'll put a little bit of toe in the water, and maybe it will work, maybe it won't. I always have an exit. Just no exit, and odds are you increase your odds dramatically to be successful.
Just do what you did, Jack. Just go. Right? You don't have to know, just go. Charlie talked about learning on the go. Brad talked about learning as you went, right? I didn't know what I was doing either when I first got started. I started my first companies. I started hustling and selling baseball cards when I was 9. I started my first company when I was selling garbage bags door to door when I was 12, right? no one's going to say no to a cute kid, right? So just go out there and sell, start your company, and you're going to learn along the way. And just have fun with it. Even if you're an entrepreneur at 9, still be a kid. Have fun with it.
Mark and Charlie have been with us for almost an hour and a half. Let's give them a standing ovation. Thanks, guys. Awesome. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of Denver Startup Week.
Every kid